Hello there and welcome back to the channel. This is Mel's Gaming here with a Great One guide for Call of the Wild. Basically in this video I'm going to be showing you absolutely everything I did in order to get my Great One. I'm going to show you all the need zones I had, everywhere I hunted, and I'm going to talk about everything I did basically in order to get this Great One. I just wanted to put a clip of him at the start just for anyone that hasn't seen it. I will link in the description down below, I will link the video of just the hunt for this guy, but this is just a technical video. I'll show all my kit and everything like that and just talk about what you need in order to actually get one. Now, first off, whilst this clip is playing, I want to make it very clear that these things are extremely rare. You could follow absolutely everything I've done and not get one. There are people that have grinded for longer than me and never seen one, never got close to getting one. So please be aware of that. Also, please be aware that there is some current issues with the Great Ones. The devs are aware of them and they are planning to fix them very soon, where certain Whitetail will spawn as level 5s and they'll be overweight, which obviously isn't what you're looking for a Great One. A Great One will be a level 10 and it will say 97 to 110 kgs. So you'll know when you're looking at a Great One or if you found a Great One track. But if you see a level 5 Whitetail or a level 4 Whitetail, that is a bugged Great One, sadly. Now, there is one way of avoiding this. Apparently, a lot of people that have had that have actually closed their map after seeing a Great One, and then when they've come back, it has been a bugged level 4 or 5. So, again, just be aware, there are some issues, everything like that, and like I said, you can follow this to the letter, you might not get one. I want to make that absolutely clear, there's no guarantee of this, but I wanted to give absolutely all the information I got and just from share my experience basically from hunting as many whitetail as I did in order to get this guy to spawn. So, taking a look at the map, this is Leighton Lakes, which is the only map currently in Call of the Wild that actually has whitetail on it. Now, I'm going to show you all the zones where I have whitetail, where I have had whitetail and they've disappeared, and just talk a little bit about the zones. Now, first thing I want to say is there is some weird respawning things with whitetail at the minute, where zones become doe only. If that happens, shooting a doe or two, I have found tends to actually make a buck come back, and if it doesn't, I tend to wipe the zone. Now, this zone here says moose, but it is actually somewhere I've had whitetail. Now, that is something that you can do as well as if you spot an animal in the same place. It's like a sticker. It will cover the whitetail zone, but the whitetail zone is still there. Now, this zone is actually where I shot the Great One. That's some hunting pressure left over from me being around in that area, so that's probably my favourite zone on the map at the minute. This zone here that says white-tailed jackrabbit, I did have whitetail here for a very long time and then they stopped spawning, so that was a bit sad, but it was not because of hunting pressure or anything like that, they just stopped spawning there. So that's something that can happen, so be aware of that, and if that does happen, just go and look for another zone, they'll be somewhere. This zone here that says moose, I also get whitetail here. Normally a group of about 4 or 5, sometimes it's only a couple of does, and then I'll shoot a doe and then shoot another doe, like in repeating until it gets down to one doe and then the zone is no more. I also had a whitetail zone right here, which is so odd to me. It was only there for one, like there was one herd that spawned there. They never respawned, no animals respawned from that group every time I shot them, so that was really odd. I also have whitetail down on this coast in the very, very far left corner, which I have 2 zones here, but they are from the same group of deer, which is really weird, and I know they're from the same group because I can follow the tracks back and forth, and it's the same deer. There's no deer that are using, one zone that don't use another. So that's a bit odd. I don't know why there's 2 zones there, and they kind of, for me, have gone between using both zones, so that makes it kind of hard to work out where they are, but normally I just chase them out of there, and then I will shoot them with a 300 whilst they're fleeing. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. This zone here where it says black-tail deer, I had whitetail here for a very long time. It was where I got the first diamond of this grind, but they don't spawn there anymore. I had a zone right here where I've placed this waypoint, and it was there with 1 doe and 2 bucks. I shot the 2 bucks, and then nothing ever respawned, so I shot the doe and the zone disappeared. So that was a shame, but for some reason that zone just wasn't producing respawns. Now, there is a hidden lake on Leighton, if you don't know about it. It is right here, and I have had whitetail in that zone for a long, long time, and then it stopped spawning bucks, and then stopped spawning deer altogether. So that was another zone that kind of died out. This little lake above it also has whitetail deer, and it has been pretty consistent again the whole way through this grind. And yeah, it pretty much has always produced whitetail. Not always whitetail bucks, but when I've shot a couple of does, I have had bucks come back. Now, at this sort of bottom section of the river, I have a few zones where it says that there's whitetails, it's a whitetail drinking zone, and I just don't get whitetail there. They were there for a period of time, maybe a couple of runs, and now they're not there anymore, but the zones didn't ever get deleted, so it still says that whitetail drink there, and I would guess that they probably can still drink there, but I've not seen them. Like I said, as well, everyone's map is going to be slightly different, so make sure you check all of these spots on your own map. And here I had whitetail for a period of time. Again, after shooting them a few times, they stopped spawning, so that was another zone that failed. But as I was saying as well, everyone's map will be different. You might have some of these zones, you might have completely different zones, your zones might be in slightly different locations, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that whitetail don't ever drink there, so make sure you check pretty constantly because they do move around a lot. Now, I've had whitetail sort of all the way in between that outpost there and this spot here that I'm showing right now, and they've kind of moved around in that section. And then I've had whitetail here, and they've been weird because they've been there and then not been there and then been there again. And it's sometimes been does, and the last time I went there it was does and 2 bucks. So again, respawns don't seem to always spawn in the same zone in which you shot them from, so be aware of that. I had a whitetail drink zone here on this little island bit in the middle for a really, really long time, and then that stopped spawning any bucks and then any does, so that one kind of disappeared, and that was another one that failed. This zone here I have had for a little while, and to start off with, I couldn't get whitetail there. I picked up a zone from a track, and I went there again and again and again, never saw whitetail, and then eventually they started actually appearing, which is something I've had in a couple of zones, and it's really weird, and I don't know why it does it. I've also had some whitetail up here in this little area, but again, they're not there, they're there. You can see actually I have a tent and a stand there, because they were there, and I was setting up for them after I shot the couple of bucks out of that zone, and then they were no longer there. Here where it says moose, I had a good size group of about 10 whitetail drinking there for a very long time, and then they just stopped being there again, so that's really odd. Now, there is a little zone around here that is a feed zone, which again is a different time, that's 5:30 to 9:30, where drink time is 12:30 to 3 o'clock. And actually, this feed zone has been pretty good for actually having whitetail in it. And I have had sort of feed zones all around here, actually where it says coyote, I had a feed zone there. And those have been really, really good in the mornings actually to check. So be aware that you can actually get quite a good number of whitetail in their feed zones, and make sure that you do check that. Now, this little lake up here, right on the edge of the map, I had whitetail deer here. Again, it still says I have whitetail there, but every time I've spawned up there in the last maybe 7 runs of doing this, I'd never had whitetail there again, so I don't know where they've gone. And then I have this little whitetail zone here, which again is weird because sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. So I don't know where these ones are going, and it's a bit odd. I've also had herds of whitetail that they kind of just wander. They never really go to a zone, and I always make sure to just cull those out straight away. If they're just wandering almost in straight lines, I just shoot them, get rid of them. They don't have a zone, they're not useful to me. Now, at these couple of little lakes here, and also at this sort of little river section here, I have had whitetail zones in the past, actually for a decent amount of time, but now they no longer exist. And also at this lake, sort of in the High Lake region by High Lake Outpost, I have a whitetail zone here where it says whitetail jackrabbit, which is why there is a tree stand there. But they have, again, they've been drinking not always in that exact spot. Sometimes they've been drinking more up into the brush, so those ones can be difficult to spot. And also, that's a zone that I didn't have for a really long time, and then I actually got it recently, so that's interesting. Now, along this section of river, I have had whitetail zones, but not again for very long, and then they have disappeared. Again, not from hunting pressure, they just don't spawn animals all the time, which again is really odd. Sometimes I can have these zones that'll appear for 1 or 2 runs, and then they just don't ever get animals again. And yeah, I find that really odd, especially when there sometimes have been animals left, and then nothing respawns ever in that zone. So I end up having to shoot, if there is a doe or 2 left, I end up having to shoot those, because to me, if there's does there, they're not contributing to anything by having those zones, so I try to get rid of them. Now, here at this lake, I had a really, really, really good whitetail zone, and I actually even took a diamond from here, and then it just, again, stopped spawning deer. But it was really nice because it was right by the outpost, I didn't have to set up a tent or anything, and then they disappeared. And then I went down to this little lake below it, sort of off to the side towards the coast on the map, and got a whitetail zone here. Now, when I went there originally, there was a couple of bucks, but the last couple of times I've been there, it has all been does. So I've been shooting them off sort of one by one, or maybe taking a couple at a time, trying to see if I can trigger some kind of respawn. Now, these 2 lakes, there's a whitetail zone here where it says whitetail jackrabbit that has been, again, pretty consistent at having whitetail. For a while it didn't, and then it did again, and then since then it's had whitetail pretty much every time. This little lake, surprisingly, has 2 whitetail zones, one either side of the lake, and again, these have been pretty good zones for me for whitetail, especially the one on the left, but again, the last time I went there, there was 1 doe, so I've removed that doe, and it'll be interesting to see if they actually continue to spawn there, seeing as the zones are still there. Now, here by this lake, I've had a couple of whitetail zones. They've moved around a bit, but they never stayed there for very long. That one there, and the sort of second one there that I showed, was the one that produced deer for the longest time out of all 3, but they were not producing deer hardly at all towards the end, and then they just stopped. Mushroom Lake up in near Chila, that has been absolutely dead for whitetail for me, which is a surprise because I used to get whitetail there all the time. Now, Chila Lake itself has been really good for whitetail. It's got 2 zones at it, one sort of either end of the lake, and again, that has been really consistent at producing deer and actually producing good sized bucks. I've had a lot of 85 to 100 weight estimate bucks, and those are always the ones I was looking to take out sort of as a most important thing to take out from every zone, so those always have been good. For a little time I had whitetail just there, but then they stopped and they've never come back. And then in Balmont again, so I'm sort of coming sort of full circle now towards sort of the middle section of Balmont. I have a couple of drink zones. This one here that says whitetail jackrabbit, I've had pretty good numbers of bucks coming out of that zone. I had a zone over here for a little time, but it was only a very small group and they didn't last very long. Then I had sort of a group that was moving up, again sort of moving north, but then they stopped spawning and that was just another weird zone. Then I recently picked up this whitetail zone here, which it is a whitetail zone and it's produced a few deer, and I'm kind of keeping an eye on this one to see if it might turn out to be quite a good zone, but they do drink in a really odd spot there, so that's kind of annoying. I've had whitetail here too, and they again have been on and off being there, so that's one that I keep an eye on, because they don't have a zone there. They did, and then the zone went away, but they still come to there. So that's odd. This feed zone here in particular is one of my favourite feed zones, and actually there is going to be a whitetail in this video that I got from that zone that was really, really, really nice to find. This little drink zone here has been very consistent pretty much the entire way through. There was originally a zone just a little north of it here, but that stopped producing deer, I think, after the first time I shot deer out of it. So that was really disappointing, as it would have been nice to have 2 that were pretty close together, but the one just below it is pretty good. So, like I said, you could have zones pretty much anywhere in these areas, so do make sure you're pretty much checking your entire map at this point. Use an ATV and drive around and pick up footprints and then zones. That's what I did. Then going towards the right-hand coast, right on the coast, I have whitetail there in 2 zones again. But again, it's 2 zones that seem to be used by the same deer. Now, it's really weird because, like I said, I can track the footprints going back and forth, and they highlight to show that that animal is using that zone, but also using the other zone. So I don't know why, but you could have zones from maybe one group, maybe 2, just along that coast. Make sure, like I said, that you check everywhere because they seem to spawn pretty much anywhere these days. Now I'm going to go through my inventory and show you everything I have and explain why I have it. Now, the first thing I have in my inventory is the 300 Canning Magnum Frontier. Now, you might wonder why I'm carrying a 300 whilst grinding whitetail. I will shoot whitetail with this. If they are in a zone that I don't like and I have to chase them out of it, or anything like that, if they're just fleeing and it's like a level 1 buck and I really don't care about getting the score out of it, I will shoot it whilst it's fleeing with the 300. I do not care, just to drop it and get that respawn. Next one is the slightly more obvious one. It's the M1, which is just an exceptionally good gun for grinding respawns because of the quick follow-ups you can get with this gun. I can normally take 2, maybe even 3 deer sometimes before they flee, and that is extremely useful when you're trying to get more and more numbers down. Now, another gun that isn't ethical to shoot whitetail with but is extremely handy to have is the 22. Now, the 22 long rifle is exceptionally useful because you can shoot near an animal with this as long as you're not too close, and it will cause them to become alert. So if you need them to move position slightly so that you can get a better shot, just shoot near them, not at them, just near them with the 22, and that will work to make them go alert so you can get a better shot. Now, in terms of scope, I prefer using the Argus scope, which is the scope with the highest powered zoom in the game. Some people prefer to use the Hyperion, which has less zoom but is a bit more steady, but I just prefer the Argus because it means that I can get those longer range shots if there's some deer that are a bit further off than they normally are. Now, in terms of coolers, I only use the grunt cooler. I don't find that I need anything else. It says that it has a low chance of attraction, but pretty much every single time I use it, as long as I sit there and hit it a few times, they will come in, and they'll just come in enough just so that you can, normally all you need is just for them to come out of the brush, because that's the one thing I found is with so many zones being a bit more hidden, getting them out of the brush is the most important thing. Now, obviously, tents are going to be extremely beneficial. So if you have the tents DLC, you're going to have, I think, 5 different tents that you will already have that you can place. After that, I think they cost 16,000 credits each. I will check that and I'll put the price up on the screen in a minute. And yeah, they're extremely useful and they're something you need to utilise for this grind. Now, something else you can use instead of tree stands and tripods in order to reduce hunting pressure are things like the Incognito Deluxe waterfowl blinds. Now, they are pretty much, they'll just do the same. They reduce the hunting pressure, but obviously you're not going to have the advantage of being slightly higher up so you can see better. But in terms of what they actually do, they're going to do exactly the same job. So I found that using those when I haven't had enough credits to actually buy more tripods all the time has been really useful, because when I actually started this grind, I didn't have a whole lot of money, even though I'm a level 60 and, you know, I've played the game quite a lot already on this account as well as on Xbox, but on this account I just didn't have much money because I was constantly doing multiplayer, constantly only shooting diamonds, and obviously cost of taxiing them to put in the lodge, it quickly builds up. So this is one of my zones that I said I have had bucks quite regularly at, and it has been a really good zone. But you can see in the whole lake, when there's actually 2 zones, one either side of this lake, there was 1 doe. And that's all that had spawned. So I've taken that doe now in hopes that she will either make way for respawns to pop up here, or that the zones will disappear and reappear somewhere else. Because where I'm looking around here with my binoculars is all areas where I had deer at this lake, and for there only to be 1 doe is really, really disappointing. But like I said, it's something weird with the respawns that sometimes shooting a doe seems to somehow open up the fact that other deer can respawn, and sometimes that means there can be bucks. Just like this zone here. I came here today and there's 3 does. But when I came here before, I had two bucks and 3 does. So those bucks haven't respawned. So what I'm going to do is shoot a couple of the does, and I have done this at this zone in particular a couple of times when I've come back and there's only been does, and then I come back the next time and there's bucks. Now, I probably would have actually shot that 3rd doe because I have wiped this zone in terms of getting rid of all the does before and then have got respawns. It tends not to be that hard to actually get the respawns when you just get rid of all the does sometimes. Sometimes just getting rid of all of them actually makes a difference. Now, something else I wanted to talk about is the space between your tent and your zone. Now, basically, you don't want to have your tent too close to your zone because if it's too close, the animals won't spawn in or they'll spook from you fast travelling. Now, I always say over 200 metres. Some people say 150, but I found the best success when it was well over 200 metres. Now, your actual exact placement of the tent is not going to affect that as much as making sure that you're a good distance away. And then with this zone, because they move around in this zone, I actually haven't set up a tree stand, a tripod, or a waterfowl blind, nothing to actually reduce hunting pressure, because they move around in this zone a lot, like I said, and actually I just find it easier to sneak in here, hide in the brush, and if they're up in those trees, I'll call them down, and then they'll give me a shot. So that's what I'm going to do here, is I'm going to shoot that very small buck and the slightly bigger buck that's here, and just take those for the respawns. And like I said, if I come back here and there's no respawns for the bucks and only the does, I'll take 1 or 2 of those does, and hopefully that will cause a respawn. Now, that's never how it works for any other species. I've actually done this while on this map with moose and elk and stuff like that. If I shoot a bull elk from a group of bull elk, a bull elk will respawn. I don't get just less elk there in general. So it's really interesting to see how that has actually how that's working with the whitetail at the minute. I have actually contacted the devs about it in the report a bug section, and they have contacted me saying that they're very well aware of a lot of issues surrounding the whitetail with their respawns and of course the broken great ones. So they're looking at fixing all of those problems in an upcoming update patch, which is actually full of hot fixes for various different things, like geese not respawning and just so many different things. Something else I want to mention whilst waiting for these deer to actually give me the shots that I want, because I want to take both bucks, is that you might get whitetail that gets stuck. This is something I've encountered quite a lot, where I'll shoot at them either with the M1 or even with the 22 just to make them go alert, and then they just get stuck in a fleeing animation, and it's really kind of weird, but it means that I can take out a couple more than I probably would have been able to if they started fleeing. But just be aware that if you do find a stuck whitetail, it does just seem to be a thing at the minute, and if anything, it gives a few opportunities for good screenshots at least. But it's not too game breaking, it's normally only 1 or 2. I have had it where it's a whole herd that's got stuck like that, and it's quite odd. But yeah, so you can see there I managed to take both those bucks quite easily from this one zone, and that's 2 new respawns. Now, in the lodge, I just wanted to talk about how many deer I've actually shot in total in order to get this great one. So all 3 of these here are diamond whitetail that I shot in the grind for the great one, and I actually did shoot a total of 5 diamond whitetail, 2 trolls and 4 rares, as well as I think 6 other diamonds and another rare from other species. So just going around that map and finding all those zones was really beneficial. And actually, you know, getting so many diamond whitetail is actually kind of nice, as I haven't shot a diamond whitetail in a very long time. So here's 2 of those rares that I shot, a little piebald buck and a little melanistic buck, and I thought they looked quite nice fighting, as you'd often find younger bucks sparring more than some of the older bucks. You tend to, in nature, I found that deer don't actually like to fight, they like to show off their size and intimidate others, so it tends to be either the younger ones that are sparring or 2 really equally sized, very dominant bucks or stags that are fighting when it comes to deer. So with those, I thought it was nice to have the 2 younger bucks sparring, as they were both smaller looking bucks, so we can assume that they're like younger model type bucks. But here's another 2 whitetail diamonds I shot in this grind, and as I said, I reckon I've shot around 800, maybe probably more than 800 deer just to get this guy to spawn. These are incredibly, incredibly rare, and like I said, I was really lucky. 800 is nothing. Like, it was over 2 weeks of just solid grinding. I did pretty much nothing else except grind for this whitetail, and yeah, like I said, it's It's just not, it might not happen. I went into this grind with the mindset of I will never see a great one, or I probably won't see one this year. So I knew that it was going to be really unlikely for me to ever see one, and that meant that when I did get one, it was just so exciting. And if you watched the video yesterday, I'm just so thrilled to actually have one and to say that I've actually got one. Got what is the rarest thing in the game. A great one is the rarest thing. You can't get any better than a great one. So I feel quite pleased that for all the hours I've put into this game in total across my 2 accounts, that I finally have something really special to show for it. So you can see here, here's another rare that I shot, just a little piebald doe. As I said, because I've had to shoot does as well as bucks, which is something you never used to have to do, I have had a couple of rare does respawn. Now, that level 3 whitetail is one of those 3 that was in that multi-mount, and he is an absolute monster, and there's a reason I'm including him. So, 1, you can see he's in a feed zone, and 2, it's actually, this was the closest I got to getting a great one before I got the great one. Because you'll see when I pick him up that he's quite special in terms of actually how huge he is. Like, this is an absolute monster whitetail. Like, this is basically like the biggest typical whitetail you can get in the game. And when I saw this guy, I knew that I must be doing something right, because I'd already had a couple of diamonds at this point, a couple of rares, and then this guy spawned. And because he was so close to being a great one, which you'll see in a minute, like I said, I'll talk about that in just a second, it just kind of gave me that boost of, I'm doing something right, I managed to get this to spawn. It was only, only a very, very small difference in the spawn, and that could have been a great one. And that kept me going for the rest of the time that it actually took to get the great one. You're probably going to shoot a lot of diamonds and a lot of rares by doing this. And like I said, I expected to get a lot more than I actually did before I got a great one. So I'm gonna say it now, probably gonna continue grinding and just see if I can get another great one or get some really decent sized rares, because I want an albino whitetail just so that I have like the trio, and I'd like a better piebald. And the melanistic I'm really happy with anyway, because I really like the rack that he's got. Even though he's not the biggest, he still looks cool. So I'm enjoying actually knowing how to grind these things right now, because they have been so tricky to grind for the longest time because of their respawns not working and stuff like that. And now I've kind of worked with it and learned how those respawns work, and I can share that with you now. It's made it so much easier. But you can see here, this guy's weight is 100 kgs. This is a max weight whitetail buck. So he only had to be, just a tiny little bit heavier, and that could have been a great one in theory. So it just, getting the level 3s, even if they're trolls, it just is like progress and shows how, like, the fact that it's like a benchmark to show that you're doing the right thing. And if it's a diamond, then maybe that diamond comes back as a great one, or maybe you shoot another one and instead of spawning as a diamond, it spawns as a great one. So if you're getting lots and lots of diamonds and lots of rares, things like that, just keep going with it. That would be my big tip, because like I said, I went into the mindset of, I'll never get one. I'll probably get a few diamonds, maybe a rare diamond. I've seen people that have got rare diamonds and really cool things from their grinds other than a great one. And just go in with that mindset that you're probably never going to see one. They are so rare, and I know how lucky I am to actually have one. So I hope you found this useful. I hope I've covered pretty much everything that I've done for this grind. This is literally all I've done, is hunt whitetail for day after day and hour after hour until I got him. And yeah, just kept going with it. If you've got any questions, please pop them down in the comments below, and I will make sure to answer and help in any way that I can. And yeah, thank you very much for watching.